think of ourselves as the most powerful beings in the universe, it's unsettling to discover that we're wrong. Time has come to see the world as it is.
Can we pull back the veil of static and reach into the source of all being? Behind this curtain lies this random pattern generator. You will be responsible for an escalation that will destroy everything.
In this episode, I'm going to talk about an amazing process of spiritual healing I experienced years ago. One day, I began feeling extreme pain in one of my testicles. I thought that it may be a hernia, so I went to a clinic and they found out that it was neither a hernia nor an STD. It was determined that it was a muscle problem. They prescribed me a mild painkiller and that was it. The pain then moved up to the right side of my lower abdomen. It would flare up a lot when I would sit down, the pain often being so bad that I would sweat. I think that this muscle problem was caused by the awkward way I would sit in front of my computer for hours every day. Anyway, one day I was with one of the spirits I originally made contact with years ago. She was the one who I mentioned as the spirit world equivalent of interior design. By this time we were extremely close, emotionally and sexually. In fact, I loved her very much. To my surprise, she took my right hand and pushed it towards where the pain was the worst. I instinctively pulled my hand back, as I assumed that touching the area would surely only make it worse. But she insisted, so I allowed her to press my hand into the painful spot on my lower abdomen. I allowed her to take full control of my hand, and she would cause my hand to form a fist, and then press my knuckles into my abdomen very hard. It hurt, of course, but I trusted her to continue. She would then use my knuckles to knead the muscle wall of my abdomen, guiding my hand slowly upward like she was working a kink out of a hose. My pressing knuckles would be guided to finish the action right on my solar plexus, where I would feel a surge of energy, presumably coming from the corresponding chakra. She would then bring my knuckles back down to the painful area and repeat the process. She would also utilize spiritual energy in this healing exercise. Each of these sessions would last about 40 minutes, and after each one, the pain in my abdomen would be lessened. One day, however, I was at a friend's house and my muscle pain flared up to such a degree that I could hardly even stand. I went to an empty room, so no one would see me doing this strange thing, and lied down on a couch, and my spirit lover did a healing session on me. It helped a bit, temporarily, but was still quite bad. So I went back home and asked my spirits if they could contact a spirit who specialized in healing, and they said that they could. What happened next was really quite amazing. I felt a new spirit come zipping into the room with a purpose. I said hello and lied back on my couch. The visiting physician being took my right hand and, instead of pressing it into my body, hovered it over the chakra points of my torso, as if they were taking some form of reading. They then pulled my hand down to hover over my lowest chakra points, still not making contact with my skin. Suddenly, I felt a surge of energy there, followed by the very curious and new sensation of feeling the muscles under my skin begin to move around on their own. I felt squirming and shifting. I felt individual muscle fibers being rearranged. After a couple of minutes of this, the being stopped. I thanked them, and they speedily left the room. From that point on, the muscle pain was entirely gone. That spirit physician was really quite amazing. So efficient and effective. And now, the news.
What the hell in God's name is going down here?
A resident of New Haven County, Connecticut, says that a large family of alien creatures living on the trees of his backyard and visiting his house regularly appear to be holding a grudge against him. The anonymous man said last Saturday that the beings also would appear to be in possession of crafts of many different sizes. I kept hearing people in our cellar and went to investigate, the man wrote on the MoveFon website. When I did, to my surprise, there were males, females, children, older male and female counterparts, which I assume are parents of the male and females of the groups. The resident described the entities as human-like people and did not provide further physical details. He claims that they appear to be good climbers and that they seem to be using the 50-foot-tall pine trees in his property as a way to get in and out of the flying ships. He says that they could also be wearing some sort of anti-gravity device. And the alien problem, it seems, has propagated deeper inside the man's home. They seem to have some way of physically manipulating our window locks and to raise up the windows without handling them, he explained, adding that he realized the creatures exhibited a friendly behavior after meeting an unusual male occupant to whom he allegedly spoke. They talked at a very low level. Now, if I remember, their lips weren't moving. But the friendliness, he says, has come to an end. There are problems with the aliens, he explains. They seem to think I had not looked after one of the children who died, according to one of the grieving aliens. The Wallingford local is pleading with MoveFon to contact him directly as he fears he could be taken away by the purported humanoids. No pictures or videos were presented because the man says the aliens come and go quickly. And besides, the camera on my phone would drive them away, he added. A 53-year-old man says he and another person witnessed an ungodly huge black bird flying over their heads while boating in an Alabama lake. Eclectic resident Jeff Wallace, who works as an engineer's assistant, told Cryptozoology News that he was at Martin Lake Reservoir on a midnight boat ride with his family, mostly children, when they spotted the feathered creature at about 10 p.m. in July of 1998. I was running about 20 miles per hour, and this thing was gliding overhead and looking down into the boat, Wallace said. This incredibly large bird was gliding above our boat and keeping pace in a glide. As I was looking up at it, I saw its head moving, as if taking stock of the contents of the boat. My daughter's boyfriend, Beau Dreher, eventually noticed me looking upward and looked up to see what I was entranced about. He looked just in time to see the bird flare its wingtips and disappear into the night sky. We were the only two in the boat that even noticed it. The boat, Wallace said, was about 19 feet long, and the alleged bird was almost as big. It had a wingspan 3 to 4 times as wide as our boat. It was jet black, darker than the night sky. Its wings were flat across the tips as it glided, but flared out as it turned and flew off and upward to the south. The estimated wingspan would be about 20 to 30 feet. The bird's body shape was that of a raven or crow, but extremely large. It had finger-like feathers. The man states that the sighting didn't last longer than 10 or 15 seconds. In Blandford, Massachusetts, 2 water treatment operators on Monday said they saw a bird so big that they initially thought it was a plane. Bernie and Noreen St. Martin told Cryptozoology News that they were patrolling the Long Pond Reservoir in a boat last week when they noticed the unidentified flying creature in plain daylight. I first noticed what I thought to be 2 planes, one large jet flying under a smaller plane. Then I realized that the small plane was a bird, said 56-year-old Noreen. At that moment, the woman said she pointed out the oddity to her husband Bernie, 64, and that they tried to identify the creature to no avail. Its large wings were flapping. It was very large. Wide wings and a huge wingspan, Noreen added. The couple said that they were able to visually follow the bird for 5 to 7 minutes as it flapped its wings flying north. The 2 water treatment operators did not produce any photographic evidence and have not yet replied to inquiries regarding this matter, but it is suspected that the alleged giant bird could have been flying at an altitude too high for a standard phone camera to be able to capture a clear image without the use of a telephoto lens. It flew overhead, and not once did it ride any thermals. It wasn't anything that I could identify, said the woman. This is the second giant bird sighting reported in a month. Now, this next account is one I've already mentioned on the podcast, but I thought it would be interesting to read a different angle on it. In Croix-Roubaix, Nord, France, on September 10, 1954, at about 10:30 p.m., Marius de Wilde, a metal worker, stepped outside his house, located in a small town on the Belgian border, and saw a dark mass sitting on the railroad tracks. When he heard footsteps, de Wilde turned on the house lights and was confronted by 2 small beings, less than 4 feet tall, wearing very large helmets and heavy diving suits. He did not see any arms on them. An artist's rendering at the time shows they somewhat resembled George Lucas's Star Wars character R2-D2. As de Wilde moved toward the robotic creatures, a green ray shot out from the craft and paralyzed him. The pancake-shaped craft on the tracks looked to be about 10 feet high and about 20 feet long. By the time de Wilde regained his mobility, however, the entities were gone and the craft had begun to rise from the railroad tracks. 4 days later, 3 investigators from the French Air Force interrogated de Wilde and thoroughly examined the site of the encounter. They discovered no trace of the entities, not even footsteps, which was not really surprising since the ground was hard, but they did find marks on the wooden railroad ties, indicating that a heavy object had rested on them. In all, there were 5 marks on the tracks, all fresh and cut sharp. After consulting railroad engineers, they calculated that the ties had been subjected to a weight of 30 tons. The marks, the investigators assumed, had been left by the object's landing gear. Something strange had taken place that night. Where the 5 marks had been found on the railroad ties, the roadbed gravel was notably brittle, as if calcined at high temperature. Further confirmation came from several inhabitants of the region who had seen a reddish light travel across the sky at about the time of the incident. This is one of the most famous events from the French UFO wave of 1954. Speaking of which, on October 8, 1954, at 21:15 hours, in Calais, France, on the road to Boulogne, a bluish object, clearly seen with a dome on top, dived toward the ground, became white, and went away. On October 9, 1954, in Huy, Belgium, a man saw a cigar-shaped object land. 2 silhouettes approximately human were seen aboard. On October 9, 1954, in Montauran, France, between Montauran and Seville, 1 kilometer from Les Mans Blancs, Dr. Fabre, Mr. Court, and 6 others saw an orange oval object oscillating in midair. It was very bright and fiery, and it came very low. On October 9, 1954, in Dreux, France, people out hunting saw a luminous sphere take off and fly toward the southwest. On October 9, 1954, at Soubran, France, several local people saw a luminous spherical object land in a pasture. On October 9, 1954, in the evening, in Rinke Road, Germany, Willy Hoge, a projectionist, saw 4 occupants of an object that had come to ground level 70 meters from the road. He was returning home when he observed a blue light and thought an airplane had made an emergency landing. The object was cigar-shaped, and 4 men wearing rubber coveralls were working under it. They were about 1.2 meters tall, and had very large chests and oversized heads. Their legs were short and thin. On October 9, 1954, in the evening, in Bouvant, France, near the Laine des Forêts pool, Christine Carré saw, for 10 seconds, a fiery sphere flying at treetop level, diameter 4 meters, protuberance on top. On October 9th, 1954, at 1600 hours, in Carcassonne, France, as he was driving near Carcassonne, Jean Bertrand saw a bright metallic sphere on the road ahead. The top half seemed to be made of transparent plastic, and two human-like figures were standing inside. It took off rapidly, flying east. Now, going to some strange events in Kenya. In Kisanana, red and black fish fell from the sky during a thunderstorm, early April 1978, following a similar event the same time the previous year. In Machakos, over at least 6 months, stones showered onto a house, some seeming to materialize from thin air, beginning the 23rd of December 1982. In Goliba, hominoids, possibly prehistoric survivals, reportedly seen by 33 natives in 11 forests. Poltergeist activity, including flying pots and pans and stones mysteriously thrown, mid-April to May 1986. Now moving to South Korea, off Incheon, men on ship saw 2 UFOs hit the water December 1950. Off Pusan, washtub-sized objects seen to fall into the sea, and after a while it sank, glowing all the while, 15th January 1956. Now moving to Lebanon, in Anaya Jebel, Saint Charbal Makhlouf died 1898, and a bright light surrounded his tomb for 45 nights. When exhumed, the body was incorrupt, and a blood-like liquid was oozing from it, which has continued to the present. Miraculous cure is a curative shrine. Now in the Leeward Islands, in Liberta, Antigua, girls' clothes and bedclothes would burst into flame 1929.
What the hell in God's name is going down here?
That was a public service announcement designed to scare the shit out of you.
He was abducted by aliens earlier this afternoon. That little girl got lost under the bed and she went into an alternate dimension.
I'm going to read an excerpt from the book The Soviet UFO Files, Paranormal Encounters Behind the Iron Curtain by Paul Stonehill. In 1947, in the Sikhote-Alin Highlands in the Soviet Far East, strange meteorites fell down from the sky, one of which had a perfect pyramid-like shape and was full of holes. The holes contained small drops resembling quartz. The crater made by this meteorite was 10 feet in diameter. The drops flew out of the crater and looked like molten metal. A dog that came too close was fatally pierced through by the drops. E. Grebenyuk of the Academy of Sciences USSR was an eyewitness. The scientist waited until the drops had ceased to fly around, after 3 days, and looked inside the crater. They saw the pyramid-shaped object and the drops, now white. Then Soviet soldiers came and took away the objects and a total of 24 drops. As a scientist, Grebenyuk was questioned extensively. There were 15 witnesses to this incident, as well as the evidence of the dog's corpse. Although the drops were carefully examined, nothing unusual was discovered apparently. There were 40 photographs, but Grebenyuk was never able to find out anything else as the incident quickly became classified.
Time has come to see the world as it is.
I'm going to read some excerpts from the book UFO, The Continuing Enigma, and it's one of those Reader's Digest books that doesn't have a singular author. In the 15th century BC in Egypt, the pharaoh Thutmose III saw silent, foul-smelling circles of fire and flying discs in the sky. In the 6th century BC in Mesopotamia, the prophet Ezekiel saw 4 beings of human appearance emerge from a vessel of bronze. In AD 747 in China, huge, flame-breathing dragons were reported flying in the sky, followed by men in airships. At AD 900 in Lyon, France, 3 men and a woman were seen alighting from an aerial ship and were set upon by a mob. In April 1561 in Nuremberg, Germany, the early morning sky was filled with over 200 cylindrical UFOs, spheres, and spinning disks. In August 1666, in Robo-Zero, Russia, a strange fiery ball of light was observed in a clear sunny sky by villagers coming out of church. In August 1883, at Zacatecas, Mexico, over 400 cigar-shaped and disc-shaped objects were seen moving across the sun. In April 1897, in Leroy, Kansas, an airship was seen leaving the ground, trailing a heifer attached by a red rope in its wake. From earliest recorded time, writers have documented for posterity many inexplicable marvels that have been witnessed in the sky. Many of the phenomena that have puzzled, amazed, and even terrified our forebears would today be described as UFO sightings. Sometimes these UFOs have become part of a culture's history and have even found their way into its legend. This is from the Mahabharata, circa 400 BC. Varanasi burned, with all its princes and their followers, its inhabitants, horses, elephants, treasuries and granaries, houses, palaces, and markets. The whole of a city that was inaccessible to the gods was thus wrapped in flames by the discus of Hari, and was totally destroyed. The discus then, with unmitigated wrath, and blazing fiercely, returned to the hand of Vishnu. Taken from the Ramayana, circa 300 BC, the unseen dwellers of the woodlands watched this sad and shameful deed as the all-powerful Raksha abducted the poor and helpless dame. He set her upon his winged chariot, which shone as brilliant as gold, and moved as fleet as the god Indra's heavenly steed. Then the chariot rose in the skies, high over the hill and wooded vale. This is from Pliny, from De Rerum Natura. Book 2, circa AD 100. In 66 BC, in the consulship of Gnaeus Octavius and Gaius Scribonius, a spark was seen to fall from a star and increase in size as it approached the Earth. And after becoming as large as the moon, it diffused a sort of cloudy daylight, and then returning to the sky changed into a torch. This is the only record of this occurring. It was seen by the proconsul Silenus in his suite. From Shakespeare, King Henry VI, Part 3, circa 1590. Edward, dazzle mine eyes, or do I see 3 suns? Richard, 3 glorious suns, each a perfect sun, not separated with the racking clouds, but severed in a pale, clear, shining sky. See, see, they join, embrace and seem to kiss, as if they vowed some league inviolable. Now are they one lamp, one light, one sun. In this the heaven figures some event. It's from Annales Lauracenses, AD 900. Now when the Saxons perceived things were not going in their favor, they began to erect scaffolding from which they could bravely storm the castle. But God is good as well as just. Those watching outside in that place, of whom many still live to this very day, say they beheld the likenesses of 2 large shields, reddish in color, in motion above the church. And when the pagans who were outside saw this sign, they are at once thrown into confusion, and terrified with great fear, they began to flee from the castle. From the Annals of Thutmose III, circa 1450 BC, the scribes of the House of Life found a circle of fire that was coming in the sky. It had no head, and the breath of its mouth had a foul odor. Its body was 5 yards long and 5 yards wide. It had no voice. Now after some days had passed, these things became more numerous in the sky than ever. They shone more in the sky than the brightness of the heavens, and extended to the limits of the four supports of the heavens. By Ovid from Metamorphoses, Book 2, 88. But Phaethon, in the pride of his youth and strength, leapt into the light chariot, delighted to hold the reins his father gave him. The winged horses of the sun hurled themselves forward, and galloping into the air, tore through the clouds that hampered their way. Soaring on winged feet, they sped past the east winds, but the sun's horses felt that their burden was too light. They did not recognize the chariot which they drew. Just as curved ships toss about if they are not carrying a full cargo, and ride the waves unsteadily because they are not heavy enough, so this chariot, lacking its normal load, leapt into the air and was thrown about on high as if it were empty. As soon as the horses felt this happen, they raced away out of the well-beaten track and galloped off, no longer on their usual course. The reins fell from his hands and lay loose on the horses' backs. At once the team galloped away out of their course. With none to restrain them, they sped through regions of air unknown. They dashed against the stars set in the highest heaven. The earth caught fire, starting with the highest parts. From Ramayana, circa 300 BC, when morning dawned, the god Rama, taking the celestial car, stood ready to depart. Self-propelled was the car. It was large and finely painted. It had 2 stories and many chambers with windows. It gave forth a melodious sound as it coursed along its airy way. For centuries, humankind has been astonished by the sudden appearance of strange creatures. Some pop out of toadstools, others descend from shining spacecraft. An experience that has apparently become quite common only recently, abduction by extraterrestrial aliens, may not be so new after all. Some of the hallmarks of the classic abduction experience have been reported for centuries. Examples are numerous. The sight of strange lights in the sky, the sudden appearance and disappearance of little people, apparently semi-human, and people who report gaps in their lives, sometimes hours, sometimes weeks, for which they cannot account in any rational way. In the past, gnomes, dwarves, goblins, elves, fairies, leprechauns, and bogeymen were the most common visitors from other worlds. Today, they are virtually unknown, although encounters with aliens from outer space are on the increase. Could it be that fairies and aliens are one and the same? Gnomes are the spirits of rocks and represent the Earth. Their role as guardians of the Earth has been taken over today by UFOnauts who exhort the humans they meet to take care of the planet and conserve its resources. Drawings of goblins bear a surprising resemblance to eyewitness accounts of a particular type of late 20th century alien visitor. Both are small with large heads and spindly arms and legs, and both are usually clothed in pale, close-fitting garments. Fairies, like modern-day aliens, were accused of using humans to improve their genetic stock. They were frequently suspected of stealing human children and of leaving in their place sickly fairy babies known as changelings. Although fairies did not travel in spacecraft, they were often glimpsed floating in balls of light across the twilight sky. Many places around the world are haunted by these fairy lights, also known as earth lights or spook lights, although they are now more usually reported as sightings of UFOs. Dwarves were the wicked relatives of the mischievous yet charming fairies. They held sway in the depths of the earth. There is a particular type of extraterrestrial alien, usually involved in abductions, that is described as possessing many characteristics of the classic dwarf of folklore. Fairies live in toadstools, while aliens appear in flying saucers. Both have a similar oval shape. The gills on the underside of mushrooms resemble the propulsion systems of some UFOs. Fairies often captivated humans with their music. Hapless mortals who fell under their spell returned weeks or years later, thinking they had been away only a few minutes, much as today's abductees experience periods of missing time. The strange creatures that are reputed to haunt the twilight and the dark of night were often assigned a fairy origin. Nowadays, glowing eyes hovering in the darkness are more likely to be reported as UFOs or described as aliens.
Time has come to see the world as it is.
I'm going to read some more accounts from patients on DMT, taken from the book DMT The Spirit Molecule by Rick Straussman. There was a humming sound. I couldn't tell if it was the air conditioner. Then I felt like I was suddenly in the presence of an alien, or of aliens, vaguely humanoid. There were serpentine colors surrounding them, producing an outline of their shape. Based on my reading, I expected leprechauns, not anything like this. The bed was spinning, rocking. It was uncomfortable, alarming. There was some constriction in my chest. That feeling then turned into the alien presence. I tried to make contact and relax into it. It seemed a lot more in control than I was. It was interested in my fear and in me. I remember that feeling from when I was a kid. When I was scared, I would relax and say to myself, the worst thing that could happen is I'll go to God when I was afraid. When I was first going under, there were these insect creatures all around me. They were clearly trying to break through. I was fighting, letting go of who I am or was. The more I fought, the more demonic they became, probing into my psyche and being. I finally started letting go of parts of myself as I could no longer keep so much of me together. As I did, I still clung to the idea that all was God and that God was love, and I was giving myself to God and God's love because I was certain I was dying. As I accepted my death and dissolution into God's love, the insectoids began to feed on my heart, devouring the feelings of love and surrender. It's not like LSD. These things really closed in around me in comparison to the spaciousness that I feel with LSD. There was no feeling of space. Everything was in close. I've never seen anything like that. They were interested in emotion. As I was holding on to my last thought, that God equals love, they said, even here? Even here? I said, yes, of course. They were still there, but I was making love to them at the same time. They feasted as they made love to me. I don't know if they were male or female or something else, but it was extremely alien, though not necessarily unpleasant. The thought came to me with certainty that they were manipulating my DNA, changing its structure. And then it started fading. They didn't want me to go. The sheer intensity was almost unbearable. The forms became increasingly sinister the more I thought. I'm gonna need therapy after this. Sex with insects. It was nonverbal communication. Even here was not spoken in words. It was an empathic communication, a telepathic communication. My body doesn't feel quite my own. There is still something of the other dimension flowing through it. I feel permeated by something else. I now have the feeling that there is something more that I can't access in my daily life. I guess it's the feeling of having made alien contact. I guess I have an expectation of that contact in everyday life. I hope for it. I know it's there. It's positive and warm. Maybe it's like an after-sexual effect, feeling alive and alert. I realize the intense pulsating buzzing sound and vibration are an attempt by the DMT entities to communicate with me. The beings were there, and they were doing something to me, experimenting on me. I saw a sinister face, but then one of them somehow tried to begin reassuring me. Then this space opened up around me. There were creatures and machinery. It looked like it was in a field of black space. There were brilliant psychedelic colors outlining the creatures and the machinery. The field went on forever. They were sharing this with me, letting me see all this. There was a female. I felt like I was dying. Then she appeared and reassured me. She accompanied me during the viewing of the machinery and the creatures. When I was with her, I had a deep feeling of relaxation and tranquility. She had an elongated head. I guess the guardians were keeping me from seeing her. They seemed like guardians, gatekeepers. They were pouring communication into me, but it was just so intense. I couldn't bear it. There were rays of psychedelic yellow light coming out of the face of the reassuring entity. She was trying to communicate with me. She seemed very concerned for me, and the effects I was experiencing due to her attempts at communicating. There was something outlined in green right in front of me and above me here. It was rotating and doing things. She was showing me. It seemed like how to use this thing. It resembled a computer terminal. I believe she wanted me to try to communicate with her through that device, but I couldn't figure it out. I'm a bit drowsy. Things about the room looked funny. It came on real strong. I thought it would last and never go away. It was the same place, neon lights defined everything. I was in a huge infinite hive. There were insect-like intelligences everywhere. They were in a hyper-technological space. At one point, I felt wet stuff hitting me all over my body. They were dripping stuff on me. Everything in there was friendly. I don't think I lost consciousness, but I can't bring it all back. There was one that was with me by my side. There was the same pulsating vibration. They wanted me to join them, to stay with them. I was tempted. I was looking down a corridor that was stretching out forever. That may be where I lost it. The buzzing and kaleidoscopic shifting was intense and went on for a long time. Then it let up, and I was in that hive. There was another one helping me, different from the one I saw earlier this morning. It was very intelligent. It wasn't at all humanoid. It wasn't a bee, but it seemed like one. It was showing me around the hive. It was extremely friendly, and I felt a warm, sensual energy radiating throughout the hive. I decided it must be a wonderful thing to live in a loving and sensual environment such as that. It said to me that this was where our future lay. I don't know why it said that, or what it meant, or if that's a good thing or not. I recall telling myself as I was coming down, I want to remember, but I can't. Rick said, "All right, we're going to start now in about 15 seconds. His hand was cool on mine, a comforting last connection to reality. I tried to count the heartbeats, something intellectual to hold on to. I got to 3 beats. There was a sound, like a hum that turned into a whoosh, and then I was blasted out of my body at such speed with such force, as if it were the speed of light. The colors were aggressive, terrifying. I felt as if they would consume me, as if I were on warp speed conveyor belt heading straight into the cosmic psychedelic buzzsaw. I was terrified. I felt abandoned. I'm completely and totally lost. I've never been so alone. How can you describe what it feels like to be the only entity in the entire universe? There are sounds, high-pitched singing, like angel voices, but they aren't comforting. They are very impersonal and don't care about me. They are simply part of the background noise of blasting through the void of the universe. It felt like going backward from life in a physical body to life as simply an energy form with no body. The essence of who I am was alone in the void, back in the staging area for life where souls wait to incarnate. I was in a place where there are no physical life forms, only colors and sounds. The singing angels were there only to observe me, not to comfort me. But even though they didn't comfort me, I did bring back an incredible sense of love. A male presence tries to communicate with me, but I don't understand. I use my mind to ask, what? The reply is garbled. It, or he, is trying to tell me I will see something, but what? I try to ask, will I know it when I see it? The presence tells me I will see something. Is it by the horizon's light I see in the vast darkness? There is a great roaring sound. It interferes with the voice because I know it is a jet out there. I'm coming back. The voice is gone. It starts with my face seeming to harden up, become firm rather than nebulous. I feel the blood pressure cuff inflate. The rest of my body comes together, and I know I'm completely back. I lift up the eye shades. I feel a deep and poignant love for Laura and Rick, whom I see first. I turn my head to see Kevin. What a beautiful relief. The first trip was lots of spinning colors. I was scared, but I kept telling myself, relax, surrender, embrace. Then I saw what I can only describe as a Las Vegas casino type of scene, all flashing and whirling lights. I was rather disappointed. Here I'm expecting this profound spiritual experience and I get Las Vegas? But then, before I had much time to be disappointed, I flew on and saw clowns performing. They were like toys or animated clowns. I had the overwhelming urge to laugh. I was kind of self-conscious about it at first, but I couldn't contain myself and I laughed out loud watching those clowns. Rick told me that clowns are a common experience. In fact, he said, oh, you saw the clowns? As if they were old friends or something. Then he said, yes, they're hilarious. I felt more confident and not as scared. This time, the aggressive spinning colors were almost familiar. Suddenly, a pulsating entity appeared in the patterns. It sounds weird to describe it as Tinkerbell-like. It was trying to coax me to go with it. At first, I was reluctant because I didn't know about finding my way back. By the time I made up my mind that I did want to go with it, I could tell the drug was starting to wear off and I wasn't high enough to follow it. I told it, I can't go with you now. See, they want me back. It didn't seem to be offended and in fact followed me back until I sensed it had reached its boundary. I felt like it was saying goodbye. Re-entry was slow and I was reluctant to take off the eye shades. Everyone's eyes were so sparkling when I took off my eye shades. I realized what Rick said was true, that the most intense part of each trip was spent tangled up in these colors. This time I quickly blasted through to the other side. I was in a void of darkness. Suddenly beings appeared. They were cloaked like silhouettes. They were glad to see me. They indicated that they had had contact with me as an individual before. They seemed pleased that we had discovered this technology. I felt like a spiritual seeker who had gotten too far off course and, instead of encountering the spirit world, overshot my destination and ended up on another planet. They wanted to learn more about our physical bodies. They told me humans exist on many levels. I needed to reconnect with my body in time for the blood pressure check and blood sampling. It was as if they, rather than Laura, were collecting the information, and they appreciated my doing it for them. Somehow we had something in common. They told me to embrace peace. I could feel myself begin to slip away from them as the drug wore off. As I started to come down, I saw these things from their world that I really can't describe. I thought of how the South Pacific natives could see only Captain Cook's small boats and not his big ships until they actually climbed on board and touched them. The re-entry was very difficult. I felt sort of lost, but I sensed the tractor beam of Kevin's love and followed it in. I went directly into deep space. They knew I was coming back and they were ready for me. They told me there were many things they could share with us when we learned how to make more extended contact. Again, they wanted something from me, not just physical information. They were interested in emotions and feelings. I told them, we have something we can give you, spirituality. I guess what I really meant was love. I tried to figure out how to do this. I felt a tremendous energy, brilliant pink light with white edges building on my left side. I knew it was spiritual energy and love. They were on my right, so I reached out my hands across the universe and prepared to be a bridge. I let this energy pass through me to them, and I said something like, see? There, I did it for you. You have it. They were grateful. I was coming down off the DMT, losing altitude. I would have to go back. I was a little disappointed that experience was spent giving when what I wanted was spiritual enlightenment. Should I have asked for something to take back first? I guess I don't feel comfortable in my role as an earthly spiritual emissary, but I did my best. I always knew we weren't alone in the universe. I thought that the only way to encounter them is with bright lights and flying saucers in outer space. It never occurred to me to actually encounter them in our own inner space. I thought that the only things we could encounter were things in our own personal sphere of archetypes and mythology. I expected spirit guides and angels, not alien life forms.
Time has come to see the world as it is.
I'm going to read some selections from Cosmic Voyage by Courtney Brown. 21 months after I completed my course in the TM City program, and just before beginning my training in scientific remote viewing, I attended the one-week Gateway Voyage program at the Monroe Institute in Faber, Virginia. This program teaches about altered states of consciousness via brainwave entrainment techniques. Before I took this course, I had already met the person who was to teach me remote viewing and become my monitor for the research investigations that I report here, and this person told me that training at the Monroe Institute was a prerequisite for the military remote viewer trainees who were to undergo formal instruction in remote viewing. Wanting to duplicate the known road of the military training program, I chose to attend the Gateway Voyage program as well. Briefly, the folks at the Monroe Institute have devised a non-invasive way of producing physical changes in the electrochemical signals that occur in the brain. Their technology is based on the use of sounds to cause various frequencies to resonate between the right and left hemispheres of the brain. Robert Monroe has labeled his patented technology Hemisync. Hemisync sounds put one tone in one ear, for example a 100 Hz tone, and another tone of a frequency only slightly different from the first in the other ear, say a 104 Hz tone. The result is a very low frequency vibrato called a beat frequency, in this case 4 Hz. Beat frequencies are not actually heard in the ears, but the mind can discern them. The brain itself creates them by blending the separate audio frequencies. In this way, sound is used to cause an electrochemical reaction in the brain that resonates at a frequency that is undetectable by virtue of its low frequency to human ears. The Monroe Institute researchers have developed a variety of sophisticated blends of hemisync sounds that are extremely useful in obtaining altered states of awareness by those who are listening. They have mapped the brainwave electrochemical activity of many individuals who are capable of experiencing altered states of awareness. By matching the maps with the changes that occur with the hemisync technology, they can, quite literally, at the flick of a switch, make one's mind resonate mechanically like that of a great seer or mystic who has spent a lifetime exploring the boundaries of consciousness. The Monroe Institute's most interesting achievement is the discovery of a set of frequencies that allows individuals to perceive an aura of non-physical existence where life thrives. I use a word you may have heard in Star Trek television programs and films to describe this place, subspace. An aspect of each of us exists in subspace, as do other beings. People who no longer reside in our physical space live in subspace. It's not accurate to say that these are dead people, since they are very much alive. At the Monroe Institute's Gateway course, they call the primary portal to subspace Focus 21. In this state of awareness, one can peer deeply into subspace and communicate with beings who may be there. During my second experience with Focus 21, a remarkable thing happened that greatly changed my views about extraterrestrials. I was on my back in a small room with a bed and the necessary electronic equipment, listening to the sounds of Focus 21 through headphones. The subjective experience was one of being mentally carried to a location. The technology used requires no imaginative effort on the part of the listener. The mind automatically tunes into the frequency that the tones generate, and one is there. After a few minutes, I seemed to arrive at some place that had an opening, sort of like a door. The resolution of the images was not perfect, but I could sense what was going on. I was at a portal of some kind. I went through the opening and found a room that seemed to have one wall missing. There was light everywhere, bright light. I looked around and saw one individual to my left. The being's body seemed both fluorescent and mildly transparent. The person seemed to be watching me, as if overseeing my visit. I went forward into the room and, to my considerable surprise, encountered 3 other people whom I knew. They were my grandfather, my grandmother, and my great-aunt, my grandfather's sister. On an emotional level, I was beside myself. Everyone was glad to see me. I was happy beyond words. I had a distant sense that there may be tears emerging from my physical body, but my awareness stayed with my relatives. My aunt, my mother's sister, had recently died, and I looked around and asked where she was. I clearly remember asking with some concern, "But where's Elsie?" At that moment, another, seemingly powerful subspace being covered me with what I could only think of as a dark cloak. I was then lifted up and transported to another location. During the trip, I asked why I could not see outside. I asked this by simply thinking the question. The moment I asked, a corner of the cloak was lifted and I saw the brightest light I had ever experienced. It was like looking right into the sun. Moreover, I had an urge to surge into the light. The cloak was then closed again, and I understood. I was being protected from being exposed to the light. I had the sense that exposure to the direct light would be harmful to me while I still had a physical existence. Shortly afterward, the journey in subspace ended and the cloak was lifted. I saw before me what seemed like hundreds of thousands of grays. These were extraterrestrials, and they existed in subspace just like humans. I moved closer and extended my mind towards them. Somehow this seemed a natural thing to do at the time. What I received sent me reeling. I felt an intense sense of pain, psychological and emotional, not physical. I recoiled back into the half-open cloak. Yet I did not want to let this opportunity go, so I tried again. This time I made an effort to sense the Gray's consciousness as they experience it rather than letting it make a raw impression on my own human senses. To my relief, the experience was different. I felt a sense of calmness, quietness, and stillness. I also sensed an awareness that, at the time, I could only compare to the mentality of Mr. Spock on Star Trek. It was as if there were no surface emotions, but there was something very deep. It then became obvious to me that my first impression of pain was related to how my mind would feel if it was forced to live as a Gray consciousness. The transition process was too abrupt. I still sensed deep pain, but I was not yet decided whether it was originating from myself or the Greys. I somehow suspected both, but it was impossible to tell at the time. At that point I heard a voice, and I knew then who had brought me to the Greys. The voice said, "These are the beings whom you want to help." It was the voice of my Aunt Elsie. One of the Greys approached me and asked if I was there to help. I did not know what to say. I sensed that they had problems, but the initial impression was that these problems were far beyond my abilities to address. I told the person that I did not know. I began to mumble. I mentioned that I would try, perhaps. Maybe I would be able to come back. I did not know what the task was that I should do, but whatever it was seemed overwhelming to me. I shrank and I felt sadness, deep sadness. But I also sensed that the time to help was not now, and I must leave. The cloak again covered me, and I was transported back to the portal and my waiting relatives. I never actually saw my aunt, but I did not really need to anymore. I said goodbye and went to the opening where the solitary subspace being I saw originally was still standing. Then to my surprise, I saw about 20 people holding hands pass in front of me and enter a door going into what appeared to be a downward leading tunnel. I considered this peculiar, but did not think more of it at the time. The sound signals were beginning to change in my mind. I was leaving Focus 21. After an uneventful return, I heard the pleasant voice from the control booth. "Welcome back. You are now fully awake and alert. Please join us in the debriefing room." Soon afterward, the group taking the Gateway course met in the large meeting room at the Institute to discuss their experiences. The first thing to come up from the discussions was that many of the participants had decided in advance to go through the experience as a group, holding their subspace hands, so to speak. They told of their voyage and their return through the door, and I knew immediately whom I had seen going into the tunnel. As for myself, I was too numb to speak. I just listened and wondered what could possibly happen next. I am in an office that my trainer uses for remote viewing instruction. There is very little in the office to distract one's attention. The dominant color everywhere is a light gray. There is nothing on the table in front of me but my pen and a stack of paper. The weather has been perfect. The course has been going well. My last target was a bridge over a river in Vietnam during the war. Target selection has been varied to discourage my mind from guessing at them. So far, I do not know what and where I am viewing until after the session is completed. My trainer begins this afternoon's session like the others. He is sitting across from me at the training table. He asks me if I am comfortable and waits until my pen is on the paper. I tell him I am ready, and he gives me the target coordinates. I write the coordinates on the paper and then move my pen to the right of the numbers. At this point, my autonomic nervous system begins to activate my hand, and I immediately sketch a crude line drawing. This drawing is then investigated and analyzed using both intellectual analysis and my own intuitions. All of this is involved in Stage 1 of the SRV protocols. Moving to Stage 2 of the SRV protocols, I begin to collect information regarding colors, surface textures, sounds, temperatures, tastes, and smells that are associated with the target. Stage 1 and 2 procedures help me to establish a mental lock with the target signal. I am still new to this, of course, so it is taking me time to isolate the signal. Finally, and after 11 pages of preliminary data, I begin to bilocate. Courtney Brown. There seems to be a mountain type of thing here. The surrounding land is a semi-soft, flat, sandy area. There appears to be a sense of grandeur associated with this site. I do not see any people right now. It looks like there may be a man-made structure on the flat area. Monitor. That's fine. Make your Stage 3 sketch. Get it all down and move into Stage 4. Okay, going through the matrix. Things are brown and sandy here. There is a house. What is that pyramid doing here? Let me AOL on a pyramid. That stands for Analytic Overlay. It must be my imagination. Monitor. Don't judge things. Just put it down as AOL for now. The house is sort of long and narrow. Made of wood, it seems. I'm sorry, but it's that pyramid thing again. It's really huge. Keep recording your data. Put it all down in the tangibles column. What else do you see? Keep going through the matrix. Well, there are people now. Lots of them. And animals. People and animals. Putting all down in the matrix. Okay, this pyramid has to do with worship of some kind. That's an intangible, isn't it? That's right. Keep going. The pyramid is tall, stone, hard, gritty. It is sandy and windy around here. It seems like the pyramid is solid, but hollow at the same time. Wow, it sure is tall. Okay, let me give you a movement exercise. Get your pen ready. Inside the pyramid, something should be visible. Wow, let's see. We have browns and light tans. Surfaces are rough, sandy, gritty, stone. It is cool, but not cold. I'm in a room. Let's see, there's this floor, stone walls. There's a table and a glass shape on the table. Write it all down in the correct columns. The purpose of this place is somehow somber. There is a sense of resoluteness combined with need or necessity. There are tunnels. I am facing a tunnel. Go down the tunnel. There is dirt on the floor here. The tunnel is dark. It leads outside. I am now outside of the structure on the surface. There is a road and a lot of sand around here. Again, I get the sense of somber purpose to this structure. Goodness, I can perceive lots of people now. I clearly get the sense that either that structure or something related nearby was a great building project and that the folks needed help and lots of resources. Apparently many died to build this. There's a nearby city. Wow. There is also a nearby mountain that is erupting. What is going on here? There are no volcanoes near a pyramid that I know of. It's like Pompeii, but there are no pyramids near Pompeii. Don't analyze, just record the data. Keep going. Lots of people have died and are dying. There is a lot of movement. People are running. Many are scattered. There is a sense of hopelessness. This is terrible. I begin to draw a sketch of the scene. The volcano seems to be to the east of the city, and people are mostly running north. Moving up a bit in time, the survivors have set up a village nearby. No one was there to help them. There is desperate poverty. There are shacks and tents. This is really awful. There are some new people rebuilding the city. They are not the original folks. They are rebuilding for a new group of people, it seems. Others are coming in. These new folks come from very far away, and they do not seem to be panicky in the sense of urgency about helping the former residents. From the perspective of the first folks, it seems like carpetbagging. Okay, that's enough for now. Write down the time limits on the session. Well, where was that? My trainer pushes a folder toward me on the table. I open it and pull out a picture taken by a satellite of the Cydonia region of Mars. There is the pyramid clear as day. Evidence suggesting volcanic activity was to the right, east of the pyramid. You're kidding. You sent me off planet to Mars? Hey, I like sending my students there. Keeps them on their toes. This was my first exposure to the idea that Mars may really have been inhabited at one time. Before this, the topic was only one that pertained to science fiction. It took me the rest of the day and evening to get used to the fact that I had witnessed an actual fragment of Martian history. Training has been going great. Yesterday afternoon, my trainer had me remote view Monterey Bay, California, where I ended up peering down on a sailboat. This morning, however, the session is of a different type. He wants me to experience a session under Type 6 conditions. This is where both the monitor and remote viewer are front-loaded with significant target information. Since I was to know about the target in advance, I've chosen the time and place that I wanted to see, the Martian civilization at its peak. I wanted to see what kind of society they had before the collapse. In a later chapter, I described the catastrophe that caused this collapse. No amount of guessing could have prepared me for what happened in this session. One of the many things that I was to learn from this session was just how important an experienced monitor could be when unexpected things occur, which is to be expected. The preliminaries indicated that the target was associated with dry land and artificial structures. I am getting browns, tans, and reds. It is sandy and windy around here. The temperature varies from warm to cool. I hear voices, music, talking. I also hear some type of rubbing and hubbub. The ambiance of this place feels a bit like Old Town Mombasa, the ancient Swahili port city on the east coast of Kenya. Go on to your stage 3 sketch. I have a road here with buildings on one side. One person is standing near a round structure. It gives me the sense of a small amphitheater. Put that down as an AOL for now, like an amphitheater. Move on to stage 4. I am now picking up people, lots of people. I now see only men. Focusing on their faces, they have no hair and have larger eyes than humans. Their skin is light. There are houses. The buildings seem to be made out of clay or adobe. These folks are poor by current Earth standards, but they seem happy. It appears to be a harsh place to live in general. There's lots of water around here. These folks like water, it seems. They have basic tools. Their means of communication seem to be rather basic as well. This reminds me of Africa. Put that down as an AOL, like Africa. Focusing in on their minds, they do have some telepathic abilities. Okay, I've located the women and children. The women are inside the houses for the most part. They don't go outside much with the children. Can you detect anything about their culture? Well, they seem to have meetings, sort of like village meetings. Let me look at the men again. Let's take a break. Resume 1/2 hour later. Well, I have the houses again. Going into one, there are 3 rooms. There is a toilet in the house. Folks around here feel this is a comfortable life. I see utensils, cups. A family lives here. Okay, I have 4 people, male and female. I get the sense that these people are polygamous. See if you can discern any type of symbol. Uh-oh. What just happened? I have experienced a time dislocation. It felt like I was snapped to another period. It was sort of a whiplash effect. Things are different here. What is going on? Don't analyze. Just get the data. What do you have? I am staring at an insignia. There are polished white surfaces around here. I see metal around here, also gray and black smoke in the air. There has been an extremely rapid technological acceleration compared to where I was last. I see other beings here now. They are smaller, shorter. They give the sense of being workers on a mission. Wow, they are motivated. For some reason, speed and urgency are paramount in their minds. These other beings have ships. Spaceships. They have uniforms with insignias. Some of these beings are pilots. I do not see any Martians right now. Try to find out where the Martians are. That's just it. The Martians are gone. They're finished. The houses are empty. I am still on Mars, but it is a ghost town except for these short advanced beings. The short beings have set up their own houses. They are modern, box-like. There are technological devices in the houses. I get rooms, again, modern. Focus on the purpose of the shorter beings. They are here as the first stage in a larger project. I get the sense that they are packaging everything. Okay, let's do a stage 6 timeline. Place the apex peak era on the line. Pause. Now locate the point on the line where you have the arrival of the others. I place the apex period on the left side of the timeline and the time of the arrival of the others halfway across the page to the right. My trainer has me spend a considerable amount of time drawing the insignia that is on the uniforms of the short beings. It is shaped like a Valentine's Day heart with a coiled snake in the center. The border of the heart shape is gold, the inside background is white, and the head of the snake is red. Good, now go through stage 6 matrix. I get the sense of two different types of beings. The Martians themselves thought of these folks as being of a different tribe of Martians, not necessarily space people. The Martians just did not understand. The situation was one of panic and despair when the short beings arrived. These short beings are milky white. The Martians viewed them as godlike. I am picking up a red liquid. The short beings are using this liquid in some way. Somehow the Martians are getting packed up in preparation for some change. This is weird. It feels like the short beings are planning on the Martians getting a physical change in their bodies and they're being put in cold storage for a while. These little short folks look like Greys. Okay, Courtney, let's end the session and put down the ending time. My trainer's cue to search for a symbol sent me in a completely unexpected direction, through time, to an insignia on a Grey's uniform. I have since had many such experiences. The sensation is similar to a rapid physical movement, but it's not possible to confuse the two. You feel sudden acceleration, followed by stillness, and a momentary sense of disorientation. At its peak, Martian society compared technologically to that of ancient Egypt. They were a people who lived under harsh conditions, but they could feed their families, live in towns, participate in community life. Men and women performed very different functions in that society. It was not an egalitarian society. Women stayed in their houses with children for the most part. Interestingly, this cultural aspect does not seem to have changed much today. Martian society experienced a major catastrophe. Many Martians died and some were rescued, although I am not sure the Martians liked the terms of the rescue. The rescuers were the beings that we now know as Greys. They arrived at the last moments of the collapse of the Martian civilization. With great speed, they somehow stored the Martians. Apparently this was necessary to preserve what could be saved of Martian life. I cannot provide a technical explanation, but the essential focus of the rescue was the preservation of Martian genetic material. All of this happened millions of years ago. After this session, my trainer and I wondered how the Martians became unpacked, and how they arrived on Earth. Virtually all remote viewing data show that the Martians seem to have been genetically altered to enable them to live in the heavier gravity and different conditions on Earth. The actual alteration occurred recently, following a period of preservation, and is not yet complete. We also wondered about the Martians' technological advances. Today's Martians have advanced technology, but not in comparison with the Greys. We now know that the Greys have technology that can enable their spaceships to traverse both time and very long distances, that is, distances on a galactic scale. The Martians cannot do this with their spaceships, otherwise they would return to their own planet at a time before the catastrophe. Their ships do use advanced by human standards propulsion technology, and they can alter the matter phase of their ships, enabling movement through solid matter. From this session, we drew some very preliminary conclusions. 1. The Martians were rescued from total extinction by the Greys. 2. The Martians were delivered to the modern time period with genetic alterations that were not perfect, apparently resulting in the deaths of many of their children. 3. The Martians have been set up with a level of technology that appears to be about 150 years ahead of current human technology. 4. Modern Martians have no place to seek refuge other than Earth. At this point in my research, I began to wonder if there may be a reason behind the Martians' modest advance in technology. Someone seemed to have set things up with the potential for a major transformational interaction between humans and Martians, with each needing the other. Recall that the Greys came to the rescue of the Martians only at the last minute. If one were to predict the future based on past data, one might foresee a catastrophic crisis here on Earth. Such a crisis would force humans to reach out for help from wherever it can be found. Martian technology might be exactly what is needed in such a situation.
Science can explain everything if we look hard enough.
Shut up, science bitch.
Nothing is true. Everything is real.
Not only is he like ruining my life, but with all this God shit that he's into, he could be ruining my afterlife.
It's a sort of interdimensional vagina that somehow appears. I can interact with it.
The fabric of the entire universe could be torn apart.
I know my mind is changing. I'm already too far gone to know what to do.
Nothing is true. Nothing is true. Nothing is true.